There's no worse feeling in pro audio than losing a file. Maybe you've been working hard on a mix and your computer crashes and you have to start over from scratch. Or even worse, you have an artist or a band in the studio with you and you have a crash and lose that magic take and you can never have that moment back. So I'm going to show you how I had a hard drive die recently, but I didn't lose any information. And with just a little bit of time, I was able to get right back where I was before that happened. This will be a short video, but I think it's going to be potentially one of the most helpful that I've ever made on the channel and will hopefully spare you from some of the heartache that I've had in the years past. So how could you possibly have a hard drive die but not lose any information? Well, I have a few systems in place that I've developed, like I said previously, through some rougher times that have set me up to where I haven't lost a single file in probably 15 years now. So this is what I do. I have three things in place. They all work together. They all have each other's back in case one fails. And the first of which is probably something that you've already heard of and that you're probably already implementing, but that's Time Machine. Particularly if you're working on a Mac, you always want to have a Time Machine hard drive hooked up that's just constantly backing up, because especially with Pro Tools updates, plugin updates, Mac OS updates, sometimes things go completely off the rails and your system is not functioning anymore. You need to be able to go back to previous versions, and Time Machine is definitely the easiest way to do that. So if you haven't done it already, go ahead and get an external drive, hook it up to your Mac, set up Time Machine, and that will be your first layer of defense against data loss. So before we move on to the next thing, one last thing I wanted to mention about the importance of a Time Machine backup is that it takes a full picture of your computer. Whereas some backup services, like we're going to discuss in a minute, that do online backup or a third-party backup, they're not a complete picture where you could restore your Mac from it like you can with Time Machine. If anything ever happens to your Mac and you have to start over, or you get a new computer and you're transferring all your information from your old Mac, there's really no easier way than a Time Machine backup. It includes everything that you need, and a lot of times with some of the third-party services, it won't back up something like the documents for whatever reason, and all your Pro Tools presets will be stored in there, and then you won't have access to those anymore. So even though Time Machine is the one that may not seem like the biggest deal, I think it still is a very important part of the puzzle here. Now, to take it a step further, for my recording drive, as well as my long-term archive and software instruments drive, I have a couple of ThunderBay IV enclosures. These are sold by Otherworld Computing, which you can find. I'll put all the links in the description here. None of this is paid or endorsed. These are just the best methods that I found to work for me. You can buy these like I did without any hard drives and then just put your own drives in. You can build out what's called a RAID system, which stands for a redundant array of independent disks. And basically you're using multiple hard drives to work together to either have redundancy to where they're making copies of each other to prevent data loss, or they're working together to work faster. You can choose what's best for you. For this particular use, I'm using a RAID 5 setup. Just know that there are multiple ways to set up a RAID that can best fit what you're looking for. But for me, RAID 5 offers a performance boost by working together, but also gives me some safety net to where, like what just happened recently, when one hard drive died, I can get a new hard drive, plug it in there, and it rebuilds, and we're right back to where we were without any loss. If you've been using a Time Machine drive and you want to take it a bit further and have more than just your Mac backed up, because ideally you don't want to be recording to the same drive that is inside of your Mac, because if your internal drive dies, not only do you lose Pro Tools and all your settings, but now you've lost all your sessions as well. So I really like to keep those separate. So again, I've got the internal drive running Mac OS, running Pro Tools. It's backed up to Time Machine. And then in addition to that, I have a separate two different RAIDs, one running my Pro Tools hard drives that I record and work from, and another that's more of a long-term archiving all my sessions, software instruments, larger files like that. I'd also like to mention that when you get a ThunderBay IV RAID, or whatever the version is by the time you see this video, it comes with software bundled called SoftRAID. And the great thing about SoftRAID is that it can predict when a disk is likely to fail. So actually with this most recent occurrence that I had, I went ahead and replaced the drive before it completely died. It was starting to have some performance issues, and SoftRAID let me know, like, hey, there's some bad sectors or whatever the language is it used. And this drive is likely to fail in the next 30 days, 60 days, somewhere along those lines. So I was able to go ahead and buy it, replace it before things completely crapped out on me. And so you get an even added layer of protection by knowing ahead of time before disaster strikes of when it's likely to happen. And you can go ahead and have a spare hard drive on hand, or like I chose to do, just go ahead and replace it as soon as you get that first warning, and then you don't have to worry about it any further. Okay, so you may think, like, what else would you possibly want to add? Because of course, all of this costs money. And sometimes when you're getting started out, you just want to buy mics and compressors and plugins, and you don't want to deal with acoustic treatment or kind of the boring stuff like this. But believe me, if you can budget for it, I think it will be a wise investment for you. And so the last line of defense here is a software offsite backup called BackBlaze. Now, there are several companies. This is probably the third one that I've used. They all have their pros and cons. I will let you look into those and decide what's best for you. I like BackBlaze because it will allow you to back up your external drives. So those previously mentioned ThunderBay RAIDs that I have also back up to BackBlaze. Why would you want to do that? Well, worst case, theft or a fire. If somebody were to break in the studio and steal my RAID drives, then all of the effort I've put into those working and not losing data goes out the window. Same thing, worst case with a fire. Of course, fingers crossed, none of these things ever happen to you or your studio. But for me, particularly when I'm working on bigger projects and we're several $1,000s into somebody investing in what we're tracking, the thought of losing that is just unbearable. So I wanted to make sure I did whatever I could to cover anything possible, from your hard drive just dying to natural disasters to some knucklehead breaking in your studio. So anyway, those are the three things. I want to keep it brief, but I hope that's helpful for you. I will put all the links in the description to help you find these things easily. And I'll be back again soon with some more audio tips, some more reviews. Appreciate you being here. If this is your first time, my name is Josh. This is Soul Studios YouTube channel. If you would like the video, and subscribe before you go so you'll be the first to know when the next video comes out. And if you got value from this, consider clicking the heart and sending a little something to the channel. All right, thank you. See you again soon.